Okay. So hi, everyone, and welcome to our final thematic webinar of the year. So today we'll be discussing iteration and development, timely as you've all been approaching your final submissions, following your feedback, and many of you have applied for prototype funding. So before we begin, I just want to go over our usual housekeeping. I'm recording this webinar and its transcript, which will be available online. So if you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your video and mute yourself. We'll share the recording of the slides with you following the event on Crowdsource in the usual event forum space. So when you're not asking a question today, please mute yourself to avoid any distractions. But as you know, we've changed our webinar format slightly, and you're free to ask questions at any time during the event. Most of the time will be dedicated to a Q&A, where you can jump in with questions at any point. So this is our short agenda for today. We'll be hearing some short presentations from Kinya and Kato, followed by our Q&A. So if you do want to ask a question during this time, just please raise your hand, and then I can call on you. That's just to help with the order of things, or feel free to put your question in the chat at any time. So I think before I really get started, I just wanted to get a gauge on who here is who has applied to prototype funding, and then I'll just give us a good idea of where you are in kind of this iteration and development journey. I think there's only 4 of you in the room at the moment, but anyone who's here, please fill out this poll. And this won't be available for people watching at home, but it's still useful for us to know. Okay. Most of you have voted now, and it's about half and half. Half of you have applied for prototype funding, half of you have not. Congratulations to those who have, and I'm reviewing those applications now. We'll be able to get that funding to you soon. Okay, so that's great to know. So some of you will be just building your designs based off feedback that we have. Some of you will be building on those designs and then take them further through our prototyping process. Great. Okay. And then I also just wanted to share a bit about our speakers, although you probably read about them in the invite, although there'll be another question before we go into the presentations. So Kinya, you might have met in the past, is a project director and co-founder of Kijani Testing Limited, based in Kenya. So Kijani Testing offers tailored field testing, after-sales support, and advisory services for innovators, companies with new products looking to launch into the Kenyan market. Kinya is a renewable energy enthusiast with a specialty in solar irrigation systems and emerging EA markets, with a passion for innovation and poverty alleviation. Kato, who I don't think has spoken at a webinar yet, so you wouldn't have met him yet unless he's your mentor, has been developing products for the past 15 years. He began his career as a software product manager in the finance and trading industry. He's also worked on the supply chain software solutions before moving into hardware product development. He was recently the head of product at NG Energy Access, and Kato is the CEO of PowerUP, a clean tech product company that is designing solutions to mitigate carbon emissions while improving customer lives. Okay, great. Again, just another question for the audience. Keep you on your toes, I guess. We have this Mentimeter poll that I'll just leave up for a second, and we'll come back to this at the end of the presentations. So for here, I'm just wondering what your initial ideas of iteration and development are, and that will kind of get your gears going for questions for our speakers today and give us an idea of where you're coming from. So follow that QR code or go to menti.com and fill in that code. I'll also put the link into the chat. This is the voting link. Please go on there and vote. And then we'll jump right onto the presentations for our speakers. Give me 1 second. There we go. Here's the voting link in the chat. Okay, hopefully you all have that down. And now, without further ado, I pass off to Kato or Kinya. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Kinya, would you like to go first? I don't know if you have slides or if you prefer to just speak.
No, I do not have any slides. If it's okay, I will just do an introduction of Kijani Testing. I hope everyone can hear me well. Thank you so much, Sean, for that lovely introduction. So picking up from what you said, Kijani Testing is an organization that focuses on really bridging the gap between end users and product developers and manufacturers. So I really think this webinar is very close to what Kijani does. One of the biggest challenges that we have seen is quite a number of really exciting products that are available, or rather being developed for the sub-Saharan African market. But we're experiencing an issue with potential end users not really understanding what these products are, not really understanding the basics of these products, thus also making misinformation quite rife. So Kijani Testing comes in to be the sort of the eyes and ears on the ground for the product developers. Some of the services that we provide are product validation services. So we help with like prototyping, doing field tests and market tests. We also work with a couple of organizations to come up with like testing procedures for sustainable technologies. Once again, the sector is not very standardized, meaning that the product developers and manufacturers do not necessarily have a document that they adhere to in terms of like testing standards for this sector. So we help with coming up with the testing procedures, and we also do like quality assurance tests for some of these products based on the methodologies and procedures that we have come with, and sort of give a check that, okay, so actually this product adheres to like these very basic standards for this product. And then lastly, we also offer technical support as a service. So once again, like I said, we have quite a number of exciting products that are available in the market or being developed for the sub-Saharan market. But what we've also observed is once the products are in the market and they're being sold, there's not much thought that is given to the quality of the after-sales support. I think most of the developers and suppliers tend to focus on selling the product, getting the product out there, and then the product actually gets to make a change, which is quite brilliant because most of these products are really life-changing. But we think about, okay, 5 years down the line, what are the warranty terms? And then actually do the warranty terms work? Because we find that some of these warranty terms are very like very vague and end up really affecting the end user. They're the ones who really feel the effect of poor quality after sales support. So what we do is we partner with suppliers, manufacturers who are selling their product in a certain region and might not really have the technical capabilities, expertise. And what we do is we agree on a certain amount to be charged, or we agree on a very low subsidized cost to the end user, and then they can use our outlets in Nairobi, Kisumu, and Kakuma region. So this would be the capital city of Kenya, a western town called Kisumu, and a northern town called Kakuma, where we offer good quality technical support to the end user. That's it from me.
Thanks, Kinya. You're right. Very, very relevant to today's topic. And yeah, it's really exciting what Kijani Testing is doing. That's why I had you come to some of the webinars. And hopefully our students have lots of questions for you then, because I'm sure you have lots of expertise in this. But moving on, just quickly to Kato's presentation. Kato, could you provide an introduction? And then we can get on to our questions.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kato Kibuka. I work as a CEO of PowerUP. PowerUP is a clean tech product development company based here in Kampala. What we do is try to create solutions to move people away from inefficient fuels or inefficient technologies to the most efficient solutions available, while trying to make those products accessible, attractive, and affordable. So the first product we have been working on is electric pressure cooker. It's the first electric pressure cooker that has pay-as-you-go technology built inside. It also has an energy meter built inside, so end users can see how much electricity they're using when they're cooking. And this is to help them understand that cooking with this electric pressure cooker is cheaper than the cost of buying and cooking with charcoal and even LPG. The product also has inbuilt tracking of the usage of the customer's usage. So what time they're cooking, what settings they're being selected, how often they're cooking, temperature, which type of cooking styles of cooking they're using, whether it's frying, boiling water, under pressure, things like that. So we use this data to analyze how the product is being used, so we can make better improvements in the future iterations. We also use this data to generate carbon credits that we can use to create revenue and further subsidize the product to make it more affordable. So on top of carbon credit subsidies and pay-as-you-go, that is how we make this clean tech product as affordable as possible to all our customers in across Africa. So we do have all our development here in Kampala. We have a product team that does the research and requirements. We have engineering lab that has mechanical, electrical, and firmware engineers. We do the technical design here, send it to China where it's built, and then we ship out to different distributors across Africa. So that's about PowerUP. A little bit about my thoughts on product development and iteration. I really think that product development is all about creating effective solutions. So yes, you are generating a product, but it has to be meaningful. It has to actually serve a purpose, whether it's to the end user, whether it's to the business. And the only way you can create an effective solution is by learning as much as possible about what is actually effective. And the only way to learn is through iteration. So in our product development process, iteration is very, very key into everything we do. We really focus on learning as much as possible from the very beginning all the way to the end. And so to give you a little bit insight about what a hardware product development process could look like, which differs from software, because software is a lot more iterative and much more agile because you can make changes quite quickly, relatively quickly. While hardware, it's more challenging because you have to commit to several designs and specifications because you cannot constantly just make changes. It's too expensive and it's too time consuming. So I think, the most important learnings happens up front. What problem are we solving? Are we actually solving the problem? And is it the right problem to solve? Or is it the right solution to provide to that problem? So lots of work needs to be done to understand the customer, the engineering team and the customer owner, whether that's a product team or whether it's a marketing or sales team. whoever is in charge of that, they need to be working very closely with the engineering team from the very beginning, going to the field, understanding customers, understanding their problems, observing exactly how customers, what their behavior is, because we see that what customers say and their behavior tends to be different. So you need to understand not just what people are saying, but their behavior. Constantly doing tests, whether it's paper tests, surveys, observations, and that's where the iteration starts happening from the very beginning. Understanding what do we want to solve, creating a business case, and then moving to a proof of concept. For a proof of concept, it's more about, can we just actually make this thing work? But we're still iterating at that point. Early on, we're still seeing, okay, maybe we have different versions of the proof of concept. Maybe we have to see how they're going to actually solve the problem in different ways. Prototypes is the next phase, where it's more like a looks like, feels like product that we take to the customer. We might simulate them making payments, engaging how they actually use it, really watching them, sometimes even video recording them, to see that the behavior and the understanding of the solution is what we expect, or maybe they're doing something very different with the solution. So we might have another prototype phase, again, based off the learnings, constantly iterating, and testing different hypotheses. So when we're with customers, we don't just send the product out to the field, we test hypotheses. We expect people to use the product in this way. We expect them to use it this often. We expect them to be willing to pay this type of price for this product and solution. And then we test against it and see if the hypotheses are true or not. And if they're not, we have to have steps to see what are we going to do about it. Whether we say that this current design doesn't work, maybe it needs to be iterated, or maybe this is the right design and we go forward to the next step. So we're doing iterations from there. Even when we do our first production build, we're still iterating. We're iterating on the production line to see what's the best way to do the assembly, while we're iterating on the best way to do quality assurance. There's constant iteration on improving processes, not just the product, but the processes of how we build it, how do we deliver it. So we see that all the way through, all the way into mass production. So that gives you a sample of how we do hardware product development, the different stages, and where we do iteration across them. So that's it for me from now.
Thanks, Kato. It's great to hear some real life examples of how students can iterate and develop post-challenge. So their process will obviously look different while on the challenge. They'll be feeding it, they'll be incorporating feedback from the concept notes into the final submission. So that is kind of a process of iteration and development for all of you, iterating on your designs based on those. And for anyone applying for prototype funds, they'll be developing these hardware solutions post-challenge as well. So please do ask any questions that you might have to our two experts today on not only how you can succeed on the challenge by continuing to iterate and develop, and how important this process is, but also for your future careers, and I don't know, get a leg up on the competition in terms of how to do this. Okay, so we're just going to jump into a Q&A portion now. But before we do, I just wanted to share the answers that we have so far on the Mentimeter. Let's see how many we have. And this will just give us a gauge on what you think about iteration development now. We only have 2 answers, but we have the iteration and development to understand how your end user will interact and use your design. Very valid. I know a lot of you don't have access to your end users or first-hand contact with them, although I think some of you have built that into your prototyping budget. That's very true. And it's also true about thinking about it in terms of how you're using it and feedback from others. Everything should be framed within how your end users eventually going to use it. So it's important to consider that throughout. Iterative development is less risky than traditional methods. It's more cost-effective to test out different design options, and performing through testing improves the quality of the end product. Okay, so I think all of you kind of, those who answered have a kind of good grasp of what iteration and development is. So now you can learn more of the technical questions when you're speaking to our experts today. So I have a few questions prepared. Again, anyone in the audience, feel free to raise your hand or put in the chat any questions that you have throughout this process, although we'll have a dedicated Q&A. But I can start off. So my first question is for Kinya, and it's just to lay the groundwork. What are some misconceptions about R&D or iteration and development? Maybe we can throw those out before we even get started going.
Yes, so what are the misconceptions of R&D? Yeah, I think for me, I'd say R&D is a term that I personally, I'm not sure if this would apply for everyone, I always relate to academics or academia. It has a lot to do with, how I think about it is just, a lot of just research on scientific research, pushing technology, but not necessarily having too much input from the market. There's some input, but the excitement is really around the technology itself. This is how I think about R&D. So some of the misconceptions that I would say is that R&D is expensive. I know we've talked about iteration. So I'm glad that we are all on the same page and we have moved away from the traditional way of product development, and we are all quite familiar with, putting a very basic product out there, or doing tests on a basic product, coming back and changing a couple of, like the features of the project based on the feedback that you get. So we're all familiar with this concept. So it does not necessarily have to be expensive, I would say. I think R&D can be done on a small scale, on a very basic product. It does not even have to be a minimum viable product. It could be a prototype made with very inexpensive material, and it can start with a very small controlled number of people. You can start with friends and family. So I would say, because I can ramble about this for a very long time, I would say it does not necessarily have to be expensive, but it could get expensive. The other thing is that it's time consuming. And again, if properly planned, if it's very explicit on what you're looking for, the kind of feedback you're looking for, you can start getting feedback on how your product works. Once again, I'm aware that products can range, but I'm just talking very generally. It does not have to be time consuming. You can start getting feedback on the product design or how the product is working from 1 week, even a couple of hours. Of course, basically, if you're testing it in a lab. And then I'd say also R&D is related to getting a perfect product, where a lot of research is done on this product, and at the end of the day, you have this super amazing product. Unfortunately, from my experience, products that are very research heavy tend to be very technically heavy and quite unrelatable to your normal citizen, your normal customer. So lastly, I'll say that tied into the perfect product, a lot of organizations are already doing some type of R&D, might not be labeled as R&D. It could be like market research. It could be data collection, but anything that involves you as a entrepreneur, as an innovator, as a business, looking out there and trying to understand how your product is relating to your target customers, or understanding that the customer behavior is some sort of R&D. Yeah.
Thanks, Kinya. I think those are really great points. We have some good resources for everyone that's kind of taking that on board within our prototyping guidance. So I know not all of you are applying to prototyping, but we have some good resources on these low-cost, quick prototypes. I think we have a TED Talk about the people who designed Google Glass, talking about just testing small solutions with cardboard and paper, etc. And if you haven't even applied to prototype funds, I think these kind of techniques are really useful for you to understand how your design works and how people interact with them. And I think some really great things for you to take away post-challenges there. Kato, I wanted to ask, what pushes you to continue iterating and developing upon a design once it works? So you know it works, how do you keep working on it, and when do you kind of draw the line?
Yeah, good question. When we get to a point where we understand that the product works, you know, it's actually really exciting because you can iterate even more. One of the reasons that someone mentioned in the question early, the response earlier, of why we iterate is to manage risks. So we want to get to the right solution as quickly as possible because we have constraints. We have so much amount of resources available in terms of money and time. But when we do get to a product that works, we have find product market fit, we get into mass production, we've launched, it does give you a lot of extra space now to iterate even more because the risk is now low. You already know what works. Now you can see what else can we do on top of that. And so this is what drives us to do that, is because we know that the product will get mature. There will be competition in the space that will come up with will find the same or similar solution. So we have to keep getting ahead. A product cannot be stagnant. Also because the customer base is not stagnant as well. Especially if you're designing a solution that's going to be used across different customer segments or geographies. So for us, we are building a product that's working across, that we're selling across Africa. But what we see sometimes in West Africa versus East Africa and Central it can be quite different behavior. And so we have to adjust for that. So we're iterating because we need to reach out to a wider group. So whether we go further down the pyramid to more low income or more affluential customer base, or whether we go you know, more wider and try to get a wider scope of the market. Whether we're trying to get different customer segments, different geographies, we have to keep iterating to be able to scale our product to adjust to all the different needs in the market. Yes, and then you also need to see, okay, well, maybe it's not within the product, it's maybe how do we broaden the portfolio? And so what type of adjacent products can we bring on board? And so we can have a wide portfolio of products that we're offering. Because all the learnings we made from the first product or the first solution, now we can build on top to create different products. Maybe we're taking like things like data collection, metering, pay-as-you-go, and now taking that technology and apply it to a completely different product. So something outside of cooking. So with all those learnings, you need to be building on more learnings on top of those learnings. That's what allows you to create value and ultimately be a successful business, particularly a startup. So that's what drives us.
Thanks, Kato. And I think the same thing should drive you, even if it's not post-challenge. All of those kind of areas that Kato was talking about are in your assessment criteria. Innovation, scalability. So I think important to consider this throughout, but also very good. Kinya, I think Kato has talked us through his step-by-step iteration and development process, and I just wanted to get a different perspective on this and hear what Kijani Testing's step-by-step processes for testing different designs.
Yeah, I think Kato has covered quite a bit of this. Yeah, the process, of course, would vary depending on the products that we're dealing with. So I usually group it in like 3 sections. So the first section is very product focused. It's really where like prototyping family falls, where we are really looking at the product design and the performance. Is it really working? Is it breaking constantly? So here we focus on just the product itself and often in a control setting. So I would put a lot of like the design work, the lab work in this section. And this is usually very early stage. And then we go to like the second stage, I would say like field testing, where we have a product that in a control setting is working. And then I will put it out into the real world. You introduce elements, such as like moisture, humidity, ingress, put it if you're in a farm, you have to deal with things like soil, like that. And also maybe in a more a later stage, you introduce handling, how the product is actually handled in the field. So still focusing on product performance, but how it relates to an uncontrolled environment. And then now we move on to market testing. And here is where we are doing a lot of market research, understanding the customer, how the customer interacts with the product. I will say also issues such as market research and understanding the customer would fall on all the stages as well. It's quite important before you design to actually have a problem that you're addressing. So I want to make this very clear that you would not be designing a product without understanding that there's a need for it, right? So while it's a very cycle, it's like it's a cycle. I think there's also sometimes where some of these stages you jump through one stage and go to another one. Once again, depending on how advanced the product is. For example, if I'm dealing with the field testing stage and you have a product out in the field and you realize maybe a handle keeps breaking because maybe it's designed for right-handed people and left-handed people are not able to use it properly. So this, of course, is a very general and random example. You'd go back to like the product focused stage, which is the first stage, and just quickly fix this, but you're still in like a very, you're in a later stage, if you will. So sometimes it does not necessarily have to follow all the stages, but I would say if you're dealing with a very early stage product, you start with just focusing on the design and making sure that it's working. And then you take it to an uncontrolled environment, and then now put it in like a number of users and observe how they're interacting with it.
Thanks, Kinya. I think that's a key thread through every single webinar we have, everyone that we speak to, is that understanding your end user in this market research is the most important thing. And I wanted to ask how can you identify areas of improvement if that the end user needs, if they don't explicitly say it to you? I think Kato said something about observing them, how they use it, rather than sometimes it doesn't line up with what they're saying. But are there other methods if, you don't have monitoring of them in that case?
Yes, yeah. Kato mentioned this, where what users say does not necessarily follow up with what they do. And yes, this is really a very complex stage, a complex process in getting to understand your target user. And there's a lot of planning that goes into like the sort of data that you have to collect on your user. So I would say, when I first mentioned that R&D does not necessarily have to be expensive, once again, depending on the stage that the product is in, and the amount of funds that are available to the innovator, I would say also having, maybe starting with like a very specific target group. And when I say specific, you have to go down to things like demographics, age, location, which would make it very simple for you to be able to test and understand how this small size and very specific target group works. And then also having very objective, like if you're doing surveys and questionnaires, focus groups, the sort of questions that are being asked have to be also done by someone who understands how to go about and do like surveys, because you find that people, me being one of them, a question, especially about something like income, might be answered in a not very truthful manner, right? Because you don't want to portray yourself in a certain way. So also the way the question is asked, by whom it's asked with. For example, if you're asking women questions, maybe it would need a woman to ask the question. So it's usually very complex, but just to simplify it, for starters, I would say for early stage products, my advice is usually to start with a very small, a very specific target customer group to try and understand them, instead of going broad, because you introduce so many differences, so many cultural layers, and then you get data that is quite difficult to sift through and is not really giving you any trends.
Right, and I think that's very important for our students. Sometimes we get very ambitious about how far we want to reach, but it's important to consider who you want to reach and specifically target them. So thank you, Kinya.
Just also to add on to that, Sean, if it's okay,
yeah.
on a student level, actually, this what I also like personally did when I was doing my final project is, you know, asking your friends and family and people who really will not like bullshit you, pardon my French, is also usually a very good way to go. But a very small group is usually key. You start with people who can be absolutely honest. You know, when you have developed and designed a product, you tend to be like the visionary. You see no fault in your product. You know every wire, every single thing in that product, and that sort of blinds you off to all the external factors. So also asking people who would be very honest with you would be a good way to go if you're like a student and you want like a bit of objective data.
For sure. Thank you, Kinya. And it's a difficult balance to strike between a dream of how your product will be used and how it will actually be used in the real world. And yeah. Coming off that, Kato, I wanted to ask, there's another balance of a dream of how your product could look and how it could work, and then what's actually feasible in the design process. And I wanted to know how you kind of strike that balance. I know a lot of our students are coming into this very ambitious, what can be done. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fantastic to start with the vision, and the vision should be solving a problem. But the vision should not be too hung up on how it will look and how exactly it will work. One of the challenges I see a lot in development is that people get too much into features and not so much into the functionality that ultimately will solve the problem. So it's good to dream big. It's good to bring all ideas to the table, but don't limit yourself by your vision or your interest. You don't want to be blindsided by all possible things. It's interesting. I've worked on products where we had all these, it's quite ambitious. Technically it was going to be challenging. It was going to be really something that hasn't been seen before. But then we ended up realizing that that wasn't needed and we could do something very simple. It's hard to sometimes accept that what you have been thinking is not really what's actually needed. And sometimes it's not so much that the design is not good or the solution is not good. It's just that it's not going to be adopted. It's too expensive. It's too logistics. It's too difficult to move around. It's hard to market. It's hard to teach. So that's a hard reality, I think, in product development. You see that sometimes the less optimal product is the most successful. And then other times you find the best solution technically and theoretically doesn't work in the real world. And so again, don't limit yourself on what you initially vision. Be prepared that anything is on the table to solve it, not just what you're visioning or what you're currently designing. Yeah, I mean, the question is, how do you strike the balance? Is just be open-minded and be ready to be surprised.
Thanks, Kato. I think in our innovative thinking webinar, our speaker as well was very clear on keeping it simple where it can be simple, which I think is an important thing to take away as well. And I wanted to, in line with that, Kinya, I wanted to ask, how do you kind of prioritize the improvements you identify in your testing? How do you choose which ones will be, if you can't go with everything, how do you choose the ones who will be most effective?
Yeah, so this is really a good one. So as Kato said a bit earlier, there are situations and many a time where you have a very complex, very exciting product, but can still do with a bit of simplicity, getting rid of some of these excessive features. Yeah, so in terms of prioritizing improvements, I think we usually, as Kijani, we take in a lot into consideration with regards to the current product you have, and if there are products, similar products in the market that maybe have been there for longer or are thriving, and understanding what about them, what problem are they really solving, what feature do people really celebrate, and getting to understand that really gives you an objective bit to go with. Also, again, having very good quality early adopter type who will give you like good feedback on your product is usually very important. But like I said, and we've discussed this before, sometimes taking the word from the customers themselves can be a bit tricky, but you can also really get a sense of some of the test subjects, and we call them early adopters, who usually are very excited by technology and usually very happy to give you very genuine feedback. And then also throwing around, having like a brainstorming session usually works for our team, because again, we find that our clients will tend to be very fixated on, like right now, the Internet of Things is booming. You know, having sensors is something that is really interesting and once again, very important. But you might just find that you tend to be fixated on something you think is very important, but it's really not. So getting that different perspective is usually very important. So I would say, just to summarize, looking around you, seeing what works, understanding why it works and how you can sort of really shout about this particular feature that your product might have, using your team to gain different perspectives, and also, once again, always looking at the end user and seeing what their feedback is.
Thank you. Sounds like not all feedback is created equal, and that sometimes it's important to really take a maybe a subjective lens on what feedback is the most important. Maybe that's important for all of you coming off the feedback that you just received, and understanding where they're coming from with everything. Particularly as you finish your final submissions as well, and you get feedback on those from 2 reviewers, which may be conflicting as well. And see where people are really taking up your innovation. I wanted to pivot towards the end, just ask Kato a bit about the scalability section of our assessment criteria and the market around iteration and development. And I wanted to ask, how do you strike a balance between sales and development, sales and development or iteration? So weighing the cost of this iteration development and projected profits. I think that's a difficult question.
So you're asking how do we strike a balance between investing in sales and continuing the development and iteration of products?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good question. I think we're actually at this stage right now, even with our company. And I think, if you're a startup business, again, limited resources. So you really have to focus on how do you continue running your operation while trying to get to the right product fit. And so I always tell people, get to market as soon as possible and start selling, and try to make the most, even if it's basic, the most practical solution, just so you can start selling. Number one, selling allows you to iterate even much faster than without sales, because you're dealing with real customers. You're actually convincing them to take the product. They're paying you money, and they're complaining if things are not going well. Where sometimes in like non-commercial pilots, it's people did not give up money. They're getting something for free. They're kind of volunteering. Early adopters. It's quite different. So I do see that sales and product development go hand in hand, because sales do lead to better product development and iteration. But I would really try to prioritize selling, because you will learn and you also bring income in the door. And you'll start, especially if you start getting aggressive with sales, you start realizing that this product is not meant for certain segments. But the sales revenue will allow you to now invest in development. But there are other sources for development. There are grants, of course, opportunity for access, supports and such grants. But there's also venture capital, right? So you can raise money to help you with your product development and iteration. But not the only way, but the best way to raise money, whether it's debt, whether it's equity, is to sell, because then there's actually there's confidence that you're moving in the right direction. So you really, in the real world, you really need to balance both. But selling will always give you immediate benefit that you can build off of, where getting the right product, spending a lot of money and time on the right product, and not proving you can actually sell it is challenged, because again, you might not have the best product, but if you can prove you can sell it, people will support you to continue to iterate. So I do have a strong preference for sales.
Thanks, Kato. And can I just ask a bit about, you mentioned if you show you can sell, people will be interested in supporting you. And we've had a few sessions with people about how to secure funding based on a prototype. That's before sales, but we haven't really had a session on beyond it, beyond this first stage of development, iteration, and selling. How do you then secure further funding beyond just what you're earning from the sales to continue developing and iterating? What do you think are the best kind of channels for that?
Yeah, sure. It depends on where you are, what sector you're in. But there's a lot of support money to support continue development. There are different grants specifically around climate tech, clean tech. But I would always focus on your sector. So if you're in agriculture, if you're in, solar energy and storage, really try to go for brands that are very specific to your area because they will listen. They'll understand what you're trying to do already. So your sales pitch is much easier. It's now just trying to differentiate yourself. So I would try to focus on that. There's certain debt facilities that are obviously sector specific. We should look into that. Equity is all about, how well you can sell a story. And having sales already started makes a massive difference compared to not having sales. It doesn't mean you're required to have sales, but just know that it does make a big difference when you're talking to these equity investors. And some venture capitalists will have a criteria that you have to be post-revenue. Not much, but at least some sort of revenue. Because again, it shows you, it's not, because the equity investors don't always look at the product. They also look at the team and say, can this team develop? Can this team sell? And can this team continue to support the product? So it's not just about how, especially for equity, it's not about, do you have the best product? It's about, are you able to run a business sustainably? So product development is only part of that. So again, do you have your distribution right? Can you get it into people's hands? Can you source it? Whether it's being built abroad or locally. Can you provide after sales? Can you find ways of scaling? Those things are also important, not just product development. So yeah, I would focus on sector specific areas. I would look at debt financing if it's appropriate, and then especially equity financing, because equity financing is good because it's more aligned. It's more about, they'll give you money to hit certain milestones you already are trying to achieve. So definitely look for those types of funders.
Great. Thanks, Kato. We're just about out of time. I haven't received any questions in the chat or raised hands yet, but I'll just put out one final call before I have to let our speakers go. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Please raise your hand. But I also just wanted to thank Kato and Kinya for coming today and for answering those questions, giving us an introduction into iteration and development, particularly at this important time for all of us on the challenge. We're about a week away from final submissions. I think that's why a lot of you are maybe missing today. But any questions, any feedback? Okay. Well, thank you both, Kinya and Kato. It's really great to have you today. I can let you go because it's at 11, and I'll just take us through some short feedback surveys for our webinars as usual.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Kinya. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Bye. As usual, our short feedback survey is up, so please feel free to go in there, provide some feedback. Those are really helpful for me. Let me know what I'm doing well, what I'm doing badly, and this will help me improve for future webinars. We just have one career conversation left, and then we'll have some kind of extra sessions, not with me, from about presentation, about CV writing. But this will be my last webinar for all of you. So thanks for joining me. Please fill in the survey. Helps me improve for next year as well. I try to figure out what to do with these webinars if things aren't going as well as you thought. Just follow that QR code. As for newsletter sign up, there's a newsletter out. I don't know if you've received it. Please let me know if you have not. I haven't received it. I'll be tracking it down and putting it on CrowdSolve and on the website. So thanks for that. I see Edson asked a question for Kato. you asked, may I ask about the pricing forecast compared to the current price? So Edson, I can ask Kato this on email and get back to you about, I can put it in the CrowdSolve follow-up. So this, can I just clarify, this is about whether your expectations of price at this kind of stage that you're at compares to what the price is actually in the market. Is that what you're asking? Are you asking how to get those two closer together so that your estimates are more accurate? Yes. Okay. Great. I will ask Kato that just now over email, and then I'll get back to all of you with that answer. If you have any questions, and you're watching the recording over the next few days, I'd say, then just email them to me, message me on CrowdSolve. I'll send them to Kato or Kinya, and then we can go from there. Okay, otherwise that's it. Thanks for joining today. I'll wrap up the session, and I hope you enjoyed the webinars this year. Again, all the recordings are available on CrowdSolve, and they will be available on the websites too. So thanks, and goodbye, everyone.